Hey, welcome back to the Confidad podcast. My name is Dan Tinkwist, your host. So glad you chose to tune in here today. Jumping right in to our mindset, say this together with me. Hopefully it's getting close to being memorized for you. I am the only one who can fulfill the fatherhood role that I have. So I choose to do it well. I get to show up well for my kids. Imperfection is reality. Ownership is a choice. Today is brand new, and so is tomorrow. I am wholly loved, so I will love wholly. Today in our equipping section, I want to talk about this idea that control is an illusion. We're going to dive real deep into this, but it's helpful to understand this sentence from the get-go. Control in parenting is an illusion. Here's some facts, okay? Our kids have a choice. When we tell them to do something, they have the choice to comply or deny, okay? There are natural consequences to both responses, right? But it's a fact. They can choose very early on if they want to do what we're asking them or not. Think about like a baby with a bottle. You're like, hey, you're hungry, take a bottle. No, I don't want one. So from that age all the way through, they have the choice to comply or deny. That is a fact, okay? Here's another fact. We control ourselves. We control how we spend our time. We control the words that come out of our mouths. We control the thoughts that we think. We control the actions that we take. And we control the regulation of our emotions. We don't control which emotions we have. We control our response to those emotions, especially, we control them much better when we are equipped with tools of emotional regulation. Okay, we'll get into that too. The last thing that is a fact, our goal should be modeling appropriate behavior, modeling wisdom, modeling the right way. You say, let's teach our kids right from wrong. Absolutely. We need to give them boundaries, but we need to model that. If we want our kids not to whine, we probably shouldn't whine, but we all do, right? So maybe having them not whine isn't a goal, but limiting how much we whine will probably limit how much they whine. Training them for regulation means we model regulation, okay? Why do we want control? Like, why do we even want to control our kids? I think a lot of it has to do with expectations. Like, whose expectations are we trying to meet? Are we trying to meet the outward expectations of the world? Because we've all been on the airplane or in the grocery store or in the place where the kid is throwing a fit and it's just a meltdown city. And we're like, I never want to be that parent. So if I just control, I'll never have to be that parent. Well, that's worrying about outside expectations versus having inward expectations of understanding what is okay, what is not okay, how do our kids respond, all of that. We should care much more about what our kids think of us in the sense of, are we safe, loving, caring, than random people thinking if we're a good parent, okay? So control is an illusion because they have a choice and we really only can control ourselves, and that's helpful as we begin, okay? It's a helpful understanding to realize and to accept the fact that we cannot control our children. All right, so interesting bit here about behavior. This is not original with me, but it's been said, all behavior is communication. Misbehavior isn't necessarily a reflection on you as a parent as much as it is a glimpse into your kid's inner reality. So pay attention to misbehavior. Are they communicating anger, sadness, loneliness, shame, guilt? This is maybe a little bit of a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. You cannot actually control your kids' behavior and love them at the same time. Okay? I'm not saying that we are trying to raise boundaryless kids. Our kids need boundaries, okay? So I'm not saying like there's no such thing as guardrails and boundaries and you just let your kid do whatever they want. What I'm saying is, like, if you're trying to control their behavior, trying to control and manipulate how they are responding to you, that is not loving. If you're more worried about your kid's behavior because of how it affects how people perceive you as a parent than how your kid actually responds in learning and growing and becoming a confident, interdependent, adult, this is an issue, okay? Worrying about what other people think of us is probably just a natural human condition, but it shouldn't affect our parenting in the sense of like, oh, no, you can't do that, honey, because, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. Can't. Why? Well, I don't want people to think I'm a bad dad. So our kids need boundaries, but they don't need an overlord controlling their every single move. Reminder, we control what we control, right? How we show up for these intentional moments with our kids, choosing to respond to our kids' behavior or misbehavior out of love instead of reacting to it out of our own dysregulation. Controlling how we approach getting to know what is really going on inside our kid's brain. We can come to that conversation, come to that exploration with a very specific posture that feels loving and safe to them and not controlling and overbearing, right? It needs to be something where we come to them with a curiosity and a unconditional love for them, okay? Our kids are not perfect. They are not complete. They're unfinished. But that doesn't mean that they are our problem to fix or our projects to complete. Okay, I know so many dads who are problem solvers and project finishers, and it's like, I'm here and I solve the problem and then we're here and then we're done. Okay, that's not your kids. Your kids are not problems to solve. They're not projects to complete. They are human beings who need to be known and have a need to belong. When we have that approach to our kids, we stop trying to control them so that we can complete them or that we can finish the project or we can solve the problem. And we begin to love them well. If we're going to do this well, this parenting thing, just showing up as a dad well, and having home become the safest place, our kids understanding that my parents aren't trying to control my behavior, they're just trying to teach me between wisdom and folly. Kids need 3 things: predictability, patience, and process. Okay, kind of like we talked about in the Saturday short. Like, we train adults with predictability, patience, and process. Like, we need to move them through this with a safe, soft place to land when they fail. We have to be predictable when our kids fail. If you always and only yell when your kid messes up or doesn't do what they're supposed to do in the sport you're coaching, they're going to learn, and it's becoming predictable, that dad is going to scream at me when I do this or when I don't do this. And maybe they don't even understand why you're screaming, but they know that's your natural response. What is that teaching them? Is that teaching them that dad's a safe place to show up when I screw up? Or is it teaching them that dad's going to scream if I let him know that I screwed up, so I better just go talk to mom, or I better just go talk to my teacher or someone else, maybe even someone on the internet? Like, you don't want your kids running to someone else when they screw up. Maybe you and your spouse or partner have something like where you know who can be good cop, bad cop, and that's line, whatever. If they have a safe space in your home, great. If they don't, make it. Create that safe space by becoming more predictable in a positive sense, being patient as they fail, and trusting this process. I have said for years that I would rather have my kids show all the emotions at home and be well behaved in school. And here's why. Because it means they feel safe at home with us. They feel safe enough to think that we can handle all of who they are. Like, mom and dad can handle my whole being and my whole experience, where at school, I have to use my self-control and I can't overreact and I can't, right? Because it's very structured and all this. So many kids, when they finish school, they come home, they are like, because they've used all their self-control that day. And they feel safe to come out of their shell and just be fully human. I mean, humans aren't perfect. We don't always get it right. And our kids feel safe. If they feel safe at home, that is usually the reaction. So if you're like frustrated with your kid's behavior, like, why are you acting so good for your teachers, but not for me? Actually celebrate it. It's hard. We've experienced it ourselves. I'm like, why do you act this way for your teacher, but you don't act this way for us? They don't know how to answer that question. But it should be telling you something like, I trust you. You feel safe to me. I thought that you could handle all of what I have to bring to the table. Like my friend Dr. Jake Smith Jr. says, they have to borrow our frontal lobe because theirs isn't fully developed yet. Remember, this is a process. Our kids are learning. Okay? In fact, when we think about behavior, it has everything to do with action, everything to do with doing. And if we're always just judging the doing and saying it's not good enough, we're actually looking at our kids through a lens as a human doing, not a human being. Okay? We are human beings after all. We're not human doings. So we have the opportunity to know more about our kids and their being than just focusing on their actions or their behaviors. If all you're focusing is on negative behaviors, you're not actually getting to know the essence of who your kid is. Because then they begin to perform and they learn they have to perform before you will show them love. But if we choose to love them for who they are, we will watch their performance blossom. Here's a quick way to say it. Their wise doing will flow from their human being. A human being who feels safe, loved, known, seen, heard is going to blossom. Out of that situation is going to come a lot of good things. Not perfect, never perfect, but a lot of good things coming out of the core motivation of who they are as a person, okay? All I'm trying to say here is don't make your kids perform before you love them. Show them love and watch them become who you've always wanted them to be. Well-behaved kids. So good behavior that is motivated by compliance is usually met with a two-faced reality. They'll be one way when we are around and completely different when we aren't. Do you remember middle school? That was the story of all my friends in middle school. They were one way when their parents were around and totally different when they're not. Normal. I don't think we need to expect that to be not the case. But if it is so drastic of a difference, who they are when they're at home or with us versus when they're with their friends, that is a concern. Because here's the deal. If they are just having good behavior, they're just well-behaved around us because of compliance, really what that means is they're scared of us. It's a fear-based behavior. You know what? We won't always be there. The goal is to launch them someday, a lot sooner than you think it's going to be. So we need to start now understanding how launching begins right now. Most parents don't want to think about when they turn 18 and they leave the house. But the sooner that you begin to think about the fact that your kids are going to launch someday, and that's actually the goal of parenting, the sooner you start to take seriously how you spend your time with them and what expectations you put on them and how you approach their choices in behavior and how you respond to those choices of behavior. So if we know that we're not always going to be there, it's our job to own this, to train them how to make wise choices when we aren't there. Good behavior chosen out of respect and wisdom is so much better than compliance because they've been equipped to think critically on their own and choose wisdom over folly. Even if they don't understand, like, why is this better than the other? They're choosing good behavior out of honor for their family, respect to you as their parents, and loyalty to who they belong to. They belong to this family, to this team. And if you create loyalty and belonging there, guess what? Good behavior can flow out of that because they're going to know this is who I am and this is how we act. Not out of guilt, not out of manipulation or fear, but because it's who they are. True essence coming to life, like lived out of their being. So fear is one way. And it's often a tool used by dictators to control their subjects. We've seen this. Your kids are not subjects, and you are not a dictator. You're a father. So stop trying to control your kids' behaviors and instead teach them how to choose wise behavior. The outcome is the same, but the motivation is very different, and the relationship is drastically different. Practically, this looks like letting them fail a lot more than you're probably comfortable with. But as long as you don't desert them in their failure or hold their failure over their heads, you become a valuable coach and teacher in learning how to live well. And as we finish here, let me empower you. You have it in you to do this. And you have a community who's for you in this. If you are feeling alone in your fatherhood journey, it doesn't have to be this way. We're here. Reach out. Find people in your neighborhood. It doesn't have to be us, but we'd love to have you join us. So I invite you to come be a part of a growing community of dads who are committed to helping each other become the dad their kids need. Because if you don't become the dad your kids need, who will? Lastly, want to remind you of our event coming up in January. We're going to do a 3-part mini course on building out your family culture framework for 2025. We're going to teach on how these things work, and we're going to practically build it together, setting the steps, setting all the things in motion, getting the goals, the bucket list for the year from your kids, and then planning your schedule throughout the year to incorporate weekly family meetings, quarterly check-ins, and looking back at how is it going with connection? How's it going with contribution? How's it going with adventure? And how's it going with service? Would love to have you join. Reach out if you have any questions. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us today, and we will see you tomorrow.